What's up, guys? Jeff here, Mad Hatter's Reef. Today, I just shut that light off. Didn't mean to shut that off. I forgot what I was doing. So, brand new video, Mad Hatter's Reef. Today, we're going to be taking a look at a topic that came up in last week's video where we did the premiere, and I did a poll asking what you guys wanted to see for a new video, and a lot of you guys voted on tips for saltwater mixing. If you notice, better camera than what we've been using, and that's because we got 90D in. This is not the 90D, this is the old faithful, but we have been using this camera for a while for taking pictures and video of corals, and it's really a big pain in the butt to be swapping back and forth between those settings, because what is good for this beautiful face is not as good for corals. For those of you that have not subscribed to the channel, that want to hit that good karma button, go ahead, hit subscribe, because we are setting a goal for hitting 100,000 subscribers this next year, and hopefully you guys can come along for the ride. All right, so I put together a top 10, but we're only going to take a look at the most important 3 of that top 10. If you want to catch the entire top 10, that's going to be the subject of this week's podcast. I'll put a link to that in the description below. But without further ado, let's jump into the top 3 things that you need to consider when you are mixing salt water for your reef tank. All right, let's go. What's up, guys? Jeff here. All right, we're in the dungeon, and we're going to be taking a look at the top 3 things that are going to help you in mixing your salt water. These are the best 3 tips of the top 10 that I put together. And again, we'll be covering that top 10 on this week's podcast. So link to that in the description below if you're unfamiliar with the podcast. But ultimately, let's get into it. Number 3, store your salt mix properly. Now, there's a lot to be said about how and which you buy your salt, because there's a lot of different ways of doing it. You can buy little tiny boxes, you can buy big bags, little bags, buckets, big boxes. Some big boxes have just one giant bag with a reusable zip tie. Other ones have like 1, 2, and 3, 4 bags in there. There's a lot of different ways that you can buy it, and that can lead to a lot of different ways of storing it. The one thing that is not going to change, regardless of whatever brand that you use, however you buy it, is that you're going to want to store your salt in a cool and dry place. And ultimately, what I usually recommend for folks is that they go out to the local hardware store and buy a bucket that has a gasket seal lid, and whatever salt you buy, let's say you buy the big box that has 4 bags in it, and the benefit to that is you're only opening 1 bag at a time, and you open that bag up. It isn't like you roll it up and then throw it back in the box. What I would do at that point is I'd take that bag once you've opened it up and used a little bit of the salt, pour it into that bucket that has that gasket lid, and then seal it. The benefit is that you have 3 bags that are still sealed in the box for when you use up your bucket, and at that point, you know, you're not opening 1 big bag and potentially exposing it to moisture. Here at the store, I am currently using the big bag with the zip ties. I've had really good success with that so far and not have had any problems at all, but I'm going to tell you right now that my consumption of salt is vastly larger than most folks that have a reef tank. I go through, a box or 2 a week. So definitely a benefit to buying it that way, I think, is probably the best way. But, if you're in a situation where you're only buying a little box at a time, you don't need to go out and buy the 5-gallon bucket. You could buy the little 2-gallon bucket, do your initial opening, and then put it into that little bucket and store it that way. Again, put it into a cool, dry place, and that is going to keep you safe from your salt pulling in moisture, because if you have been in this hobby long enough, it's had to have happened to you. That salt will pull moisture in. And, I've been asked the question in the past, is it okay to use that salt once it hardens? And I, have not done the research, have not actually intentionally hardened salt and then, melted it down or mixed it and then, tested it against newly mixed salt water.
I haven't done that, so I can't speak to it, and I really would be worried about, the parameters of the salt once you did actually mix that salt water. So I'm at that point probably going to discard that salt. For me personally, that's how I'd go about handling that situation. So storing your salt mix properly, coming in at number 3. All right, number 2, follow the manufacturer guidelines. This is something that I feel is not stressed enough, and it's going to get, I'm going to say that probably even more so for number 1. But every salt is different. The way in which that salt mixes is different from company to company. The way that you store it once it is mixed is different from company to company. And what you do, whether you're using a heater, a power head, if you have air exposed to it, if you're running a bubbler, all these things can change the parameters of the newly mixed salt water. So the most important thing that you can do is understand how the brand of salt that you purchase needs to be mixed and stored for long-term use. And one thing that I think that is incredibly important with that is you have somebody that's on the internet that is making content, whether it be here on YouTube or on a website. They're writing things. Personal experience is definitely probably the most important thing to learn from. And obviously, these manufacturers that put these products out there, they know their product and they know how it needs to be mixed, how it needs to be stored. And these are the folks that you need to be listening to, not some guy with a YouTube channel that decided to put a how-to out there. All right. So number 2, follow the manufacturer guidelines on mixing and storing the salt. It's going to dramatically increase your overall success. And the number 1 spot, test your parameters of newly mixed salt water. And this is incredibly important for, obviously salinity, right? You want to make sure that you're at whatever specific gravity that you're going for. I personally mix my salt water at 35 parts per thousand. It goes beyond that too. Like temperature is another thing that you want to take a look at. Again, you want to consider the manufacturer's, guidelines on mixing salt water, whether you want to use a heater or not. But it's going to dramatically increase the transition or the success of transition into your reef tank if it is very similar of a temperature. And going beyond temperature and salinity, some things that are incredibly important is something like alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, other parameters. You can even take it as far as mixing your salt water and then doing an ICP test and sending your water off and seeing what the results are. I don't think that this is something that people are doing enough. And you can mix salt water and you think that it's good, you store it for a week, or even some folks, they mix their salt water maybe once a month and they expect when they go to it that their alkalinity is going to be good. And there's a good chance that it probably isn't. And you would learn a lot about your salt, even beyond following the guidelines by testing those parameters, the alkalinity, the calcium, the magnesium, to see where they're at, because you might be surprised of what you're doing to your tank, because the whole idea of doing a water change is to replenish your alkalinity, is to replenish your calcium, is to replenish those trace elements. And if you are having some type of precipitation happening in the way in which that you are handling your salt, that's going to be counterintuitive, and you're not going to have the results that you're looking for. And understanding the way in which how your salt acts long term is incredibly educational, and the only way that you're going to ever figure that out is through parameter testing. All right, so that's it. We got store your salt mix properly, coming at number 3. Number 2, follow the manufacturer guidelines, and probably the most important thing, test the parameters of the salt once you have mixed it based off from the manufacturer's guidelines, so that you have understanding on how you did. So that is the 3 most important of the top 10 that I put together. The remainder of that top 10, and I'll go into this stuff again on the podcast, but the remainder of that top 10 will be discussed on this week's episode of Saltwater Aquarium Radio, and I'll put a link to that in the description below for you guys. All right, so time for a little fun. I'm going to poke a little fun at myself. And this is why I got the earbuds in. And I can't even tell you how many times I actually had to, like, test myself prior to making sure that the sound was good, because there was some things going on that was not working. Without further ado, and I don't know why, but this video had caught on relatively late in the game. I think it was uploaded in 2011, and it was one of the first videos that I was kind of getting in front of the camera. So I get a little nervous, and I really, really don't understand what the deal is with the accent. And I was just thinking about this the other day, because I remember somebody saying to me, and they're like, Jeff, where are you from? And I looked at him, and I'm like, I'm from Auburn. I'm like, 5 minutes that way. And they're like, that's weird. And I never really asked why do you say that? Because, well, I'll let you guys figure it out for yourself. All right, let's get into it. Gotta love the graphics. This was top notch. This was like, I went out and bought editing software to be able to make the video like this.
Hey guys, it's Jeff for Mad Hatter Reefs, and today we're going to talk about mixing salt water for a saltwater aquarium. This is a video intended for beginners. The things that you're going to need to make salt water for your aquarium is a salt mix.
Gotta have the salt mix. Gotta have it.
An empty bucket or
Gotta have an empty bucket.
container, preferably food grade.
Gotta get that food grade.
A power head or pump.
Power head or pump, whichever, for the food grade bucket.
And something to measure the specific gravity.
Gotta measure the specific gravity. Something to measure it. Anything.
A hydrometer.
Gotta get a hydrometer. Gotta get one of those hydrometers there,
One of the main things about
Hydrometer.
mixing salt water.
And let's talk about that for a second, really, because I got kind of hung up on just busting my own cojones. But, all right, so the hydrometer is definitely not the preferred way of measuring salt water. Refractometer is definitely better, and there's people out there that would argue that. That's fine. Anybody that's been doing this for a period of time understands, the value of a refractometer. And the reason that it is head and shoulders above a hydrometer is that it can actually be calibrated, where the hydrometer, the little plastic dangly thing that's in there, may or may not move. And whether it does or not is how accurate you are going to be with measuring the salinity of your newly mixed salt water.
As a beginner, is you need to do a weekly water change, and I know that's a big commitment to make for a lot of freshwater aquarium hobbyists looking to get into the salt.
Yeah, for you guys that are looking to get into the hobby there, it's a big commitment to do a water change, because I know that you freshwater folks, you don't like doing your water changes. Hey, it is what it is, huh?
Saltwater aquarium hobby, but you need to do a 10% volume water change weekly for your tanks, and if you can commit to that, your tank is going to do awesome. All right, let's get started. All right, once you have your water in your container, go ahead and place your pump in the water. Don't turn it on just yet. And with Instant Ocean,
there's nothing, I don't know what that, you could turn it on. It'd actually probably be better to turn it on than to do what I'm about to do.
basically it's a half cup per gallon.
You just take that half cup, you take it from the old lady. She doesn't know, she doesn't half cup nothing. So, you just get the measuring cups from the kitchens, and you grab some salt and you throw it into the tank there, the little food grade bucket,
I have 4 gallons of water here that I'm mixing. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3.
Just listen. really should be sprinkling that. It's not a lot of salt, but like there'd be a benefit to having that pump running and sprinkling the water into the. Sprinkling the salt into the water so that you are not just dumping it in there and like that kerplunk sound that you're hearing would be a little broken up and it would be mixing a lot better.
And 4. And that should be right on for the right specific gravity, but you always want to check. You don't want to just assume that it's where it needs to be. Another key note, when you're done mixing your salt and you have a bucket, and I recommend a bucket of salt because you can reseal it.
Hey, my man was on something there. Because that actually happened to me. I think the first or second thing of salt that I got turned into an absolute brick. And from there I started using buckets. But yeah, that was a good point.
Salt has a tendency to draw moisture right out of the
Moisture. Draws moisture out of the air.
air and become rock solid on you, and it's no good after that. So once it's been...
Just look at that salt just sitting on the pump. I'm trying to explain something. Let the man talk.
set up, ready to go ahead and plug your power head in and let it mix for at least 6 hours. And the reason that you want to wait as long as you want to make sure that all the salt is dissolved. You don't want to be putting salt mix directly into your tank because it's going to damage your livestock quite a bit. And you
Some good points there. Again, I'd go back to what we talked about earlier in this video and following the manufacturer's guidelines as far as time duration in which the salt should be mixed. Obviously, it is important to make sure that you are, testing throughout the process so you can kind of see if the salt is actually dissolving properly. But again, I'm going to break out this hydrometer and talk about some mixing tips here. So let the man talk.
always want to double check with your hydrometer to
Hydrometers. Got to get your hydrometer.
make sure that you have the correct specific gravity that you're trying to achieve for your tank. I usually will check it at about 6 hours. Sometimes I've waited an entire day to let the salt just mix with the pump going. And another thing too is you always want to put a lid on top of your bucket so nothing's falling into your salt mixture. So that's pretty much all there is to mixing your own salt water for your saltwater aquarium. If you guys have any questions, shoot me an email. Thanks for watching.
All right. So, not horrible. I don't know what happened with that video. So, I put it out there and, nobody watched it for forever. And then, all of a sudden, it just started gaining ground. And, a lot of people were watching it. And still to this day, I'll go there and I'll take a look at, the views that it's getting. And it's surprising to me. So, obviously, at some point, I need to revisit the subject of mixing salt water and kind of show you guys how I would do it as a hobbyist. And I could even show you guys how I do it as a store owner. So definitely some interesting things there. Poked a little fun, had a little fun with it, but definitely, a lot of useful information, even though that it was very, very long ago and very early in my reef keeping hobby. And thank God that I don't talk like that anymore. I probably will say that in another 10 years. I'll be like, listen to this guy talk. But yeah. That was fun. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks so much for joining me. And if you want to dive a little bit deeper into the subject of mixing salt water, jump into the comment section down below. Leave your hot tip. And don't worry, the fun doesn't have to stop here. You can check this video out. I will see you over there.